Hi Mariana. Hi
Peter?
Daria. Hi Barbara. Dina. Wow. Babette.
Okay. So let's just take a minute to talk about the tuning fork, and this is our 26th show. Um, it's always an extraordinary and exceptional feeling to begin a new show. This time after traveling to Europe um, with Margaret and also with Babette, who was with us, part of our trip. Um, it's interesting that during the COVID time that Emily and I created the tuning fork here at home in New York, being in lockdown, of course, and feeling that there was this sort of hunger for a community and for content, meaning perhaps connecting us. We have to be sure that our technology is all set up here. And by the way, Emily is our producer as well as director with me. I'm John Halpern, and that's Emily Harris. We're actually in the same room. So the concept of tuning fork is, what a tuning fork does. It holds a tone, it holds a vibration. And so during the pandemic time when many of us were feeling anxious, there's also this sort of contrasting possibility that we could radiate appreciation. We could radiate also sort of the introspective capacities for reflection and connecting deeper within ourselves, and through that deep connection with ourselves, connect with our families, our communities, and the environment. What a year. I believe our last guests were Delia and Brainerd. Is that right, on the 25th show? And I think that Brainerd is here today. Hey, Brainerd. And as a matter of fact, the way things work, through Brainerd, Margaret and Emily and I met in a sort of peculiar virtual world where things that are meant to happen, I guess. And shortly after that, Margaret, I shared a video with you that you identified a kind of sound that sounded like shortwave radio, which was a big influence on me as a kid, the shortwave radio. I could tune into places all over the world and have these sort of, visionary experiences of, I'll never forget hearing the 200th birthday of William Shakespeare, like a 12-hour marathon about William Shakespeare. And I'm just like a young Italian-American kid in the suburbs tuning into my shortwave radio. And when you were a kid, shortwave radio seemed to have been an element that connected you to the world, much in the way that, the Zoom meeting is connecting us around the world today. Maybe not quite the same, but in a certain sense of an oceanic feeling of connection, with the greater space, the world, humanity, and maybe the universe. So I thought I'd just also share, Margaret, this little bit of this bottle here, which is Holunderblüten, which is a certain kind of syrup that's made from a flower that grows in the Alps. And you sweeten your water with it. And so cheers to our trip, Margaret.
Cheers.
How are you doing over there in Amsterdam land?
Yeah, it seems actually like quite a long time ago that we were in Austria together. And I mean, the whole trip kind of seems like a dream. It was so unreal, just like the way that we met, and then the intensity of the trip. It was a trip on itself, I would say.
If you don't mind, I'll share a little bit of our trip with people. I'm going to share a screen, okay? And Yeah. So I think we can see that. Zoom. Right. You guys see that, don't you?
Sure.
So that's I don't know, these are some kind of flowers over there, and these are Swiss Alp, or yeah, I think those are the Swiss Alps taken from the ground in Vaduz, Liechtenstein, where we had to pick up some heavy metal uh, for the trip, and literally, and bring it down to the south. There's Margaret,
Oh
and
wow.
this is yeah, that's Thomas Trummer, isn't it? The director of the Kunstmuseum
Hmm.
in Bregenz, and Emily and I. Um, we're not sure why Martin took such a distance from us at this moment, but we're trying to.
I think it's because of COVID.
Oh, you think? Well,
Yeah.
we might be fixing it up in Photoshop, nevertheless. And our friend Peter had a show here in an old turbine factory outside of Bregenz. And Bregenz was, by the way, I think kind of COVID free somehow. Margaret, maybe you can just tell us about the Bregenz environment at this time of the pandemic.
Well, it was not COVID free, but it was the first province of Austria where the numbers really went down. Oh my goodness. Yeah, that was the first area where the numbers went down. So it was kind of very special. I mean, it felt really like being in like having a big party to go there, because that was the only area where the cafes and restaurants were open, and also the museums. So we went to Kunsthaus Bregenz, and it was, yeah, it was just, I mean, here in Holland, the museums were closed the whole time. So it was for me, it was the first time to be in a museum again. And it really felt like it was my birthday. And yeah.
Diana Gonzalez, you're in Panama, and wow, we spoke about you so much. Hello, Jana. Hoping things are going well there with the family.
Mhm.
Um, we miss you very much in New York, Jana, but it was amazing to know that Margaret and you have such a strong personal
Hi,
connection,
Jen.
and we didn't know that until we were on the road together. Um, I want to point out, by the way, that this landscape is pretty much what Margaret would see when she woke up in the morning for, you know, about 10 years of her life. And Margaret, you can narrate a little bit about that childhood experience when the borders were essentially defined by mountains. Margaret's father had to walk over a mountain like that to go to work. So he only could like visit his family once a month, and every time he went up and down that mountain, he was taking his life in danger, risking his life. Now that's the kind of and we're talking about the 1970s, okay?
No,
Um,
earlier.
Early in the 70s, okay,
Yeah.
but early
So,
70s,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So this was actually the tunnel was built. The tunnel opened up in 1969, the same year that the first people were landing on the moon. So that was kind of a very big year for us in the village.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just popping through a few images from our trip. I'm coming back to the mountains. And this is the Großglockner, is it, Margaret?
Yeah.
Um, where we spent part of the day traveling. Emily and Margaret were walking. Be natural. Be natural, the director says. So, anyway, did you notice that little bit of butter there in the kitchen? And I guess, Margaret, that's a sort of typical traditional mold for butter.
Yeah, it's a wooden mold that they use to yeah, to press or to make this beautiful um, Yeah, decorative piece of butter.
By the way, I can stop the screen share for a while, and if I can figure out how to work my Zoom technology. Gian, how do I do it?
There's a stop share button.
Okay, good. Yeah. Um, well, Margaret, maybe it's time to go into a little bit your work and your projects and your sensibilities, um, to add some story and scholarship to the institute and to our community. And thanks everyone for your attention and concentration here together with us, creating a certain quality of tuning forkness radiating out of our community today, both in our Zoom intimacy and our greater exposure on live YouTube and Facebook. And thanks, friends on Facebook and YouTube, for being here with us today. We've gone a little bit into our trip. The occasion for the trip, Margaret, was really the celebration of Joseph Boy's 100th birthday. And Joseph is deceased since I think about 1987, I believe. And there were some
86.
celebrations.
86.
86,
January 86. Yeah.
Okay. A heavy day for many of us that were close to Joseph, as Babette and I were. Anyway, so the pretext of our trip was an invitation to a celebration of boys in Bolognano, Italy, which is about 30 miles away from Pescara on the east coast of Italy. We were further invited to show the film in an art cinema festival in Napoli, and Emily and I were then invited to stay on the island of Capri, where we gave a talk before some very wonderful high school students. That was very much the cultural activism sort of curriculum in a certain way. But the trip started off with Margaret and Austria, and we had this amazing kind of revelation to realize where you had grown up, Margaret, and to be in the environment, the actual tactile space of your childhood home. Was the home built while you were growing up, or was it already built when you were born?
No, the home was built in the house was finished in 1949, actually. So, but it was extended. So as I was growing up, it was extended and it was growing bigger. Yeah, and it was built by my father. Everything was done by him. So that's kind of special.
So when you see the butter mold, for example, everything in Margaret's home was sort of carved wood and all these very exquisite sort of wooden, sort of details. The molding around the door frames, up on the ceilings in one of the rooms in the living room, I believe, there were these sort of mandalas, with different sort of variations of design, all hand carved wood. And your mom, wasn't she a sort of tailor at some point, Margaret? And your parents went out and did workshops, kind of creative workshops?
So my mom was a tailor, and that really, it really informed also my work a lot, because my mom was actually a specialist in making the traditional clothing. And she was kind of the only one in this whole region. So she was also giving courses to other women in the region. And she took us kids with her when she would give the courses. So we would help, and like from age 5, we would help with the handwork. I mean, this was it's all like a lot of like embroidery, and everything is made by hand. and my mom also made the clothing for all of us. So making clothes, actually, I didn't show you the room. I didn't take you to the room where this all happened, but it was a very special room where we spend a lot of time. And so, the making of clothing and the fitting and even like knitting and like sitting under the knitting machine, the sound of the knitting machine and the sound of the sewing machine and all of that's really something that was like it was like a daily thing. It was not something that was just happening once in a while. So that's why I have a big fascination with textiles. I have also a lot of knowledge about textiles. And I didn't learn that in school. I just learned it at home. So that the working by hand, like my father worked with wood and my mother worked with textiles. It was very central in my upbringing.
Margret, what do you feel like, for example, these sorts of aspects of your childhood and experiences? How do you sort of recognize their sort of capacities to, lend power and shape in your studio, in your practice?
Well, of course,
Was
like, yeah, like,
it possible in the mountains to sort of, these mountains have, for me, a kind of mesmerizing quality where you're just so sort of entranced with these dramatic kinds of shapes and the weather and the extreme contrasts of snow and trees and all this business and wind and maybe life and death. What was this kind of world like for you, and how is that informing your work and over the years, and eventually, of course, your participatory work, which is really obviously terrifically important. We have your relay book, for example. Whoa, where am I? And your new book that's come out, Margret, which you're going to have a show about the new book. I think is it next week?
No,
yes?
The new book is the other one. The other one is the relay is the new book. Yeah, this is the new one. Yeah.
Okay. And we'll talk about more later. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I tell you, I mean, when you grow up in this kind of landscape, like when you go there, for you, it's very special. Like when you grow up there, you just take it for granted. And of course, there is, some things that leave big impressions, like you said, you're very close with nature, so you understand that you have to watch out for the weather. I remember that sometimes there was so much snow. That's a long time ago, and that's actually coming back now. The last years that there is so much snow that, for instance, the kids cannot go to school, but also that it's actually dangerous because there's a lot of avalanches. So like when I walked up to the Großglockner a week before you were there, and there were so many avalanches that they had to clear the road that goes up to, the huts in the mountain, and the snow walls were like 8 meters high. So that just tells you, something. And yeah, it's so, but I mean, I don't know, the nature, I would say in that sense, it didn't influence me that much. What really what had a big impact on me was this idea that, like you mentioned the radio before. So the radio at the time was like a furniture, right? It was like a big piece of wood, like a wooden object with beautiful fabric and a light behind, and you could choose the different channels using these like very big, I think it was probably like the first kind of plastic that was made, right, to use to find all the different channels. So anyways, like through the radio informed me about the world, because at the time we didn't have TV. So for me, the world came in through the radio, and over the radio, I would hear things that are different, and that made me very curious. Like, I don't know how, maybe around the age of 8 or 9, I think I started to develop ideas that I really, really, really wanted to know what is behind the mountains. And then I would walk up. I mean, as kids, we would go up into the mountains, and I would always like hope to see the other side. You know, like when you go to the second highest mountain, the Groß Venediger, you can actually see Venice, like when the weather conditions are really good.
You're kidding.
Yeah, but that's like, that's not a mountain that you can just go up there every day. And then if you go up there, the weather has to be really good. So basically, when you climb up the mountains, you see more mountains. You don't see the other side. So, you know, so it was like before the tunnel opened up, it was really an area that was quite isolated because there were not really any tourists. There was no industry, basically. Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to say hello to Gunther Duxel, who was here for a moment. I don't know where he is now.
Sonia Mendati.
Sonia, yeah, what do I see?
No, he has his picture up.
Pictures off. And hello, Gunther and Sonia in Innsbruck. Hey, Gunther. And was quite extraordinary. And Margret, again, thanks from my heart for connecting Gunther and I again. Gunther and I worked together back in 1989 on a project in Innsbruck. And, well, our trip with Margret was so, I don't know, like almost mystically synchronistic in so many ways. And Brainerd and Delia are there. Thanks for being here, Ron Smith. Babette, it's amazing. I see that the sun is down, but still there's a bit of, twilight or whatever you call it, end of the day light in Amsterdam.
It's, so long light in Amsterdam. It's unbelievable. It's wonderful.
It's wonderful, huh? And as we get more into the summer, there's more light, no, Babette?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Anyway, so Margret, there was a sense of maybe being trapped by the mountains.
Yeah, so the thing was that for us it was for us kids it was very exciting when the tunnel opened up, because that's when people came in from different parts of the world, and even they probably came from Germany, most of them, or not from very far. But for us it was we were looking at the cars, and the cars had like different plates, right? Not the Austrian plates. And Germans speak a different German than we do, because we speak a dialect. So we would make, we would kind of teach them our dialect. And I don't know, it was a very, very interesting, moment. And it, in me, it fostered a lot of curiosity, and like, I think when I was 10, I had it like completely in my mind that I have to discover the world and go as far as I could. So I think when I was 13, I went to Innsbruck. I went to school there, and then to Vienna, and then to New York. And so I went further and further. So, that kind of fostered a big curiosity in the unknown, or things that are different.
So I'd like to just read a little description that we wrote about Margret's work, sort of frame a little bit of what's going to come up next in our show with Margret's materials. Margret Wibmer, through her participatory events, relational object and images, contributes to the Institute a provocative interstitial space that seductively instructs a re-examination of that which seems familiar through disorienting our preconceived and assumed identities, labels, and prejudice. So, working in the elusive, familiar, yet questionable world, seemingly material and fixed, she accompanies us in repositioning our private and social compasses in a way that enables greater inner dialogue, social engagement, contemplation, and reinvention. I shy away from reading prepared texts and things like that on the show, but Margret, your work is very effective as social engagement, and as Babette and I would perhaps agree, certainly social sculpture. And I think it's important to now get into the screen sharing and the real depth and substance of what it is you're working with. And I think it's exciting to recognize that although we're talking about materials, forms, shapes, photographs, objects, performances, participatory experiences, that what's really happening is we're working in some other space of human emotion, conceptual fixation and disorientation, and perhaps opening up of our conceptual systems and structures, our notions of identity, etc. So all these sorts of mechanisms and tools and mediums that Margret you employ sort of help us to catapult and explore a little bit of this other area of dimensionality, a very ephemeral substance, rather than the tangible sort of forms. You use these sensual and tactile experiences to somehow evoke a burst of consciousness and awareness in this other world. So, if you don't, does that sound okay to you, Margret? As a sort of
Yeah, that sounds very interesting actually, because what you just described is, and that's exactly what I use material, and it's materiality is very important, but actually it's about the other things that you cannot photograph and you cannot film, and it's not about form so much. In fact, it's a lot of my work is a lot about relations. So I come back to not being able to see behind the mountains, right? So yeah.
Thank you, Margret. That's really great. And I guess we can begin with a little bit of the screen sharing. Something else comes up in my mind, but thanks for taking us on this adventure, Margret. And for the Institute, perhaps we could pay attention to this little bit of scholarship where Margret uses, the familiarity and sort of maybe the context occasionally of commodification, the sort of framing and packaging of the human body, the female body at times, the actual wrapping of the body in materials as a kind of repackaging and opportunity to rebirth from this new context of a new sort of womb that Margret's work sometimes offers. Particularly the event I'm thinking of is in the church in Amsterdam, and let's share the materials now. Here we go.
You have to mute yourself.
I'm going to mute myself, I promise. And Margaret's going to narrate.
I think it's good if
Margret,
we.
you'll kindly narrate a little bit what we're seeing when you feel like.
Yeah,
it's the
I
right
think
time to
it's
do that.
good for the video to start. We start watching, and are we going to show the photograph? No, the video first, right?
Okay, can you see? Can everyone see? Margaret?
Yeah. You see the body there on these are tombstones.
Margaret, your volume level is perfect if you want to narrate.
Okay, so what we are seeing is a performance called Timeout in the Oude Kerk. This would be translated as the Old Church in Amsterdam. And this is actually the oldest building in Amsterdam, and it's also the first church. Today it's a museum, and it's also still used as a church, but it's also called the living room of Amsterdam because it's been used throughout the centuries, not only as a place of worship but also as a meeting place. So the building, let's say the beginning of the building was in the Middle Ages, actually at the beginning of the 14th century, and it started growing. It went through different periods. It was first Catholic and then Protestant, and a lot of beautiful things were taken out of the church. And what's very specific is that the floor is paved with tombstones. So I believe there were in total 22,000 people buried, if I have the numbers correct. And all kinds of people, like rich people, famous people. For instance, Saskia van Uylenstein, the wife of Rembrandt, was buried there. And yeah, some very rich tradespeople. What's happening here? So I got invited to develop a work for the old church. It's about 3,000 square meters. I believe that's about like almost 10,000 square feet. So it's a huge space. And well, you know how it goes when you develop a large work like that. It goes through different stages. So yeah, maybe we can show this for a moment. So here you see the building, and actually from the outside it doesn't look that big and impressive because you have all these little these kind of chapels, right? Maybe we can show the next slide from the night. Yeah, so this is it's located near Central Station in the middle of the red light district. Yeah, this is obviously before COVID. It's a very busy area. And what I first noticed when you go inside the building is that outside it's extremely busy, but so I would go there and sit there and observe people to see what they are doing when they go into this building. And I noticed that most of them are not even taking so many photographs, but just walking around and looking at the columns, at the frescoes on the columns, at the vault. It has a very beautiful wooden vault. I believe it's the largest one in Europe. A middle-aged wooden vault. Is there an echo? Can you hear me okay? I hear some strange sound. So the image that you see here is during the rehearsal. This is a mother with her daughter.
Yeah, there is a strange echo.
And oops. Okay, and here you can see quite well like how I constructed these codes. So I use in a lot of my works I use clothing that I developed for the project to kind of enable people to do something. I hear a strange like feedback.
I'm not sure what it is.
it may be possible that somebody in the group tonight has two devices that are open in the same way. Is that possible?
Could you mute Russell?
Who's Russell?
Everyone's muted, John. I think it's coming from the two mics that are close on your end.
Thanks, Brandon. Are we better now?
You have to mute yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so here you see the wooden vault, right? I think that's what it's called. Yeah, it's a very special place. So anyways, I was invited to develop a piece, and I did like a first test in 2014. It was part of a group exhibition, and it was how can I say? I mean, yeah. Well, yeah, it's kind of difficult.
Margaret, when we were at your home, how can I talk? Can you hear me there, Margaret?
Yeah.
When we were at home with you in Matrai, in the kitchen, you described to us this very sort of moving story about a person who had to somehow surrender herself to what was going on with her internally in terms of mortality and having lost somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. So in fact, the photographs that you see here are all very light. I lighten them up actually a little bit so that you can see the details. But in fact, this was during museum night, and the church was very, very dark. And I made these black coats. It's made from a black wool, and the wool is very, very soft. So the reason why I use this kind of fabric is because I wanted, the fabric, the surface to swallow the light. So when people are lying down on the floor, they kind of almost disappear. Yeah, you can't see it very well on the photographs, but what happened really was that, I mean, a lot of the stories or some of the feedback that I got from participants, like one woman, her husband was her husband's funeral was actually taking place in that church. And she was lying down on the spot where she was standing during the funeral, because she told me that during the funeral she was so emotional that she couldn't really process, her husband's passing. The emotions were too strong. So she was lying down on that spot to again to go through that emotional process, and to relive that moment, and to say goodbye to her husband that had passed away. That's one of the stories. But I mean, there's all kinds of, like, there was also a student who she told me that when she first walked in, she was really scared because she didn't know what to expect, and she came in and she saw these people lying on the ground, and she thought they were dead actually at first when she came in. Here you can see pretty well. I mean, the hood is very big. The purpose was that you don't really see the face. So maybe I can also explain something about how I constructed the garment. The fabric is quite light, and it has just the kind of weight that you can feel it very nicely on your shoulder. Like, it's not too heavy, but your shoulders drop a little bit. Like, it makes you feel very comfortable and immediately a little bit relaxed. And then you wear this very big hood, and then you're by yourself. So you're by yourself, but you're also with a group, of course, because the other people are wearing the same thing. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the garment as a kind of mediator or as an enabler to enable people to participate in a situation that is actually quite scary. But and these are sheep woolen mats, because of course it would be much too cold to lie down on the tombstones.
Margaret, may I
Yeah.
ask, are those the family seals on the tomb?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what there are the actual seals that people would commission to be made by some hand worker.
Yeah, exactly.
They were carved or chiseled into the stone, placed over their grave.
Yeah.
Do all the participants lie on their backs facing upwards, Margaret?
Yeah.
And so there's a sense of, as you said, isolation, within one's own space, provided by the shawl and the cover. But there is this awareness that other people are somehow communally engaging in this experience themselves.
Yeah, so the people, so we had I had 40 coats, and during the night we had close to 3,000 visitors. So I found it very important that the people don't feel rushed, if we would accompany somebody to lie down. So I was working with 30 assistants, and the role of the assistants was to invite people to participate and to make them feel comfortable and to welcome them. Actually, there's a couple of people here tonight. Barbara Philipp, she was participating. She's here with us.
Hi, Barbara. Thanks, Barbara.
And also Mariana Maruyama, she wrote a beautiful, beautiful text about this work. Actually, the text describes it much, much better than the video or the photographs. Mariana. Yeah. So it's very, very difficult to show this kind of work in video or photographs, because it's not about what you see, right? It's about what happens with you. So, and it's also in that sense, it's not my work, but it's the people's work. I mean, what the people experience, that is the work. Is
right.
that
so
yeah?
Obviously, the participants are creating the work with you.
Yeah.
And creating it with each other. Maybe Barbara, would it be okay for Barbara to say a few words about her experience and the experience within the community that she was aware of?
I didn't hear very well, so did you ask about the experience, how it was to lie down?
Yes, what was the overall experience like, Barbara, and for you and your friends, for example?
Oh, good question. It's a longer time ago, but what I remember, I mean, I also come from Austria, so the churches are spaces that were well known for me also as a child. So I like to visit churches, to see them. So the first impression I had when I went in, I was seeing people waiting It was a very, very slow, very welcoming gestures. And I think we are also sitting on these banks. And I remember, yeah, because we had these, how do you call this? These shoes, also
The
these
leg warmers.
the lane warmers.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
it was so nice. I felt so pampered. I felt so hugged in a way. So, and now my son is coming, hugging me.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so this warm hollows, this was very, very nice. And then I could actually go into the experience. It was a kind of, okay, I trust, because it was not in the beginning, what is going on here? It was a little bit mysterious. So this warming, this textile which warms you, this gives you really, also really physical warmth, because in the church it was cold. It gave me comfort, and it gave me trust to go into the experience. So this, I remember this very strongly. And then, I mean, yeah, people, so the volunteers, they were with you, but at the same time, you could find your place in the church, a space, and lie down. So then you were, as Margret described, with the clothes on, with everything, you were in your own bubble, in your own world.
Yeah, like I wanted to, there was this student from, I believe she was from Taiwan, and she told me after that, like, she was really scared when she walked in, and then she decided to participate. And then when she was lying down, she was crying because she felt lonely, and all this loneliness was, I mean, it was overwhelming her. And then she started imagining that that her ancestors are in the grave underneath, or in the graves. You know, there are several generations of people lying underneath, and yeah, things like that happen. So what you just mentioned, Barbara, like this aspect of you know, that the assistants were putting on the leg warmers with a lot of attention, and that you were guided, you know, through this golden gate. Like, first you are waiting, you have to give off your bag and your own coat, and then you're waiting, and then you're guided through the golden gate, and then you sit down, and then you go to the wardrobe, and somebody is putting on the coat. So it's not like people were just taking the coat themselves, but it was and in fact, there was a Japanese artist, was one of the people who helped with the coats, and he told me after that he was doing his best to find the concentration to kind of put on the coat in a very, very focused manner. So this is all like a preparation to make you feel comfortable and to do something that, yeah, I mean, that is quite challenging. And of course, the title of the work, Timeout, can be interpreted in many different ways, but definitely in the context of the Oude Kerk, it of course talks also about you know, our relation with death. So, and in fact, the way that the work was developed, or I would say the first onset to this work was the inspiration was a kind of a very strong feeling of that I had, and I think many people probably have, of feeling constant pressure, you know, in a 24/7 economy where we constantly have to outperform or perform or outperform. There's a lot of competition. You have to, you know, constantly prove yourself and be better, right? So, I mean, it kind of came out of this sense of, I think it's time to take a break, but not take a break like a coffee break, and not even like, I mean, you're lying down in the shavasana, right? You're lying down in this yoga pose, but this is not. It's not like a yoga, because there's because of the historic significance of this location, there is a lot of other things that are happening. So it's really also about connecting with the ancestors, connecting with the history. And I mean, also, you know, the people that got buried there, these are all kinds of people. These are, for instance, also slave traders, you know, for instance. Like, I mean, Holland has this, you know, very dark history, colonial history, right? Colonial past. And so, I mean, you know, some people would know exactly where they are lying down, like they're lying down on the grave of some rich man, and kind of, if they know the story, like a former director actually of Oude Kerk told me that he was imagining the whole history of this guy, like the grave there where he was lying down, like this guy was traveling to China, and he was an American and he traveled to China, and then he came to Amsterdam, and some others, like during the rehearsal, a lot of people wanted to lie down on the tombstone of the wife of Rembrandt. Yeah, that was kind of a waiting line for, you know, people that wanted to lie down there. And actually, I see somebody else, Daria. She was also she was participating in the rehearsal. Daria, do you want to share something also?
Daria, turn your microphone on, please. Thank you. Yes.
I don't know if you remember, but it was one of my best days because I was developing an awful toothache, but it made it much more intenser, my experience of this, because I felt so bad, and I was there not just as a private person, but also as a delegate from the Austrian embassy, such a face like this, and I felt so awful, and I was so curious to experience how this feels with the coat on and lying there, and it gave me some rest, and I could relax a little bit despite my pain. It was for me it was a very strange and special day, but I will never forget, because this was really the beginning of a long painful way, but it made it special in another way. And lying down was give me some peace.
Margret, when you talk about a transient reality, is the ritual sort of an interface to a transient reality? The ritual sort of, you know, gives us access to another temporary reality in some way? Is that how it functions, this non-religious?
Yeah, exactly. So it's important to mention that it's a non-religious ritual, even though this is happening in the church. In that case, I also do other places. But yeah, transient reality. You know what my thoughts were. My thoughts were that it's important to create something to take people out of this pressure zone. You know, it's almost like you know, when there's a lot of rules and a lot of things that you have to abide to, and there's a lot of tension that is building in the body, it's very, very difficult to get out of it, you know. And I like to mix scary things with pleasant things, which I also do in this work. So
but to what end? For what's the mission? What's your purpose? In this case, you're really connecting people directly with the reality of mortality.
Yeah, exactly.
But yet there's a sort of rebirth aspect through that contact with mortality. So it's not morbid but it's somehow informed by another character of spiritual force.
Well, there is also, I mean, there's another really important element, and that is, you know, that you are there with others. You're connecting with the other people that are participating. You are not doing it on your own, and yeah, I think this juxtaposition of like what you see, like when you see somebody lying there on the tombstone, and what you feel, these are two completely different. These are different realities, but I think this is in that way the work, I think, succeeds in addressing. You know, addressing also our relation with death, which a lot of people, especially in the West, I think, rather not talk about or are afraid of. I mean, it's not so much part of our lives, right? It's always about being fit and young and beautiful and successful. Yeah.
Also, Margaret, what's powerful about it is that it's also about being comfortable in the unknown. That you're creating this, you know, sort of interface where people can feel comfortable, yet in a very, very unplanned, unfamiliar space. So it's a kind of also like, you know, get used to that experience of the time away from your conceptual and mundane patterns.
Well, actually, yeah, it's interesting that you're using the word pattern because like I told you before, so of course there is a kind of a choreography when I work with so many people and such a huge space. You have to have kind of a structure. That's why I had like all the different locations inside the building. So there was the location where people take off their own coat and leave the bag, and you know, and then they enter the gate, and then they sit down. And I made all these stations, but in between those stations, there is also a lot of space for people to make their own decisions. So, for instance, they make their own decision where they are going to walk, you know, in the space, and where they're going to lie down. There is, and that's actually a very important element in my work. This, I want to give the people a responsibility. So I'm not completely taking them by the hand. I don't want them to feel that there is, you know, it shouldn't be, I don't want it to be rigid in the sense like, okay, these are the rules and this is what we're going to do, because that's exactly what I'm criticizing also with this work, the rigid structure. You know, what also has developed during these times of COVID, that, you know, governments are making decisions for, you know, for the people. And because they're not looking at individual situations, they just make like, you know, general rules. And then depending on the country, depending on the culture, the people have to obey all these rules, right? I mean, in some countries, including Austria, actually, you know, the people are being then kind of controlled by the police and so on, you know, if they follow the rules or not, right? So this is exactly also what this work is criticizing, and this is why this aspect of what I call chance encounters, that's not the word that I invented, it's a word that was used, I mean, it's a term that was used by John Cage and Merce Cunningham, for instance.
And Marcel Duchamp.
Marcel Duchamp, yeah. So there is always, you know, there is always room for the participants to do their own thing and to take their own responsibility. So yeah, it's not
Now,
just following instructions.
in some other context, and maybe in contrast to the dynamic of this work, and by the way, the work was performed in other spaces or not?
Yeah, so it was, well, first I did a test at Oude Kerk, then it went to Melbourne at Armati Design Hub. This was a completely different context. It was an exhibition about fashion and performance. And I also developed different types of coats, because the coats, so the color and the fabric correspond with the architecture. So yeah, the idea is that the body kind of melts with the architecture. It becomes one with the space, right? So it was performed in Melbourne, and then a few months later it was taken to Japan. In Japan, it was performed in a museum that is specialized in the Japanese tea ceremony. And I worked with a tea ceremony master, and we did it in 2 tea houses. So this was a completely different context. And then it came back to Oude Kerk, and then the year later it was performed at Palais Tokyo in Paris. And that was yeah, we can show that maybe a little bit piece of video, because that was a completely different context, I would say, almost opposite to what was going on at Oude Kerk. Yeah, so here you see, I don't know, I guess some of you know Palais Tokyo. It's a huge space. There is like several floors, and each floor is, I don't know how many thousand square meters. So this was part of a performance festival titled Do Disturb. That's the name of the festival. And so the instruction here was that we took people to different locations in Palais Tokyo in groups, like several people together. And then we asked them to stand still. But the interesting thing in Paris was that the participants, they started to reinterpret the work. So yeah, which is beautiful. So the performance was going on throughout 3 days, from like morning until midnight every day, and the whole festival was drawing 19,000 visitors. So what was interesting there was that people who would come into the building, they thought that these people in the black coats are performers, but when they go down in the mezzanine, they see the wardrobe and they understand that they can participate. And yeah, so I was in that case, I was very interested in the switching of roles, like the onlooker and the participant, but also this performance was taking place a few months after the terrorist attacks in Paris, and of course some people felt kind of uncomfortable with the presence of these black hooded figures. So you know, again, it's about it's a question of identity, but also being afraid of something that that is unknown, and at this, it's again like this inside outside situation, you know, like when you see it from the outside, you are maybe afraid because you have certain associations with this kind of hooded figure, and when you participate, you feel very comfortable. So when you participate, also very strange, and maybe because it was in the context of this festival, you know, that you become a sculpture, and people would just come towards you and start making photographs, or making even photographs, trying to make photographs of your face, like you, you become a public sculpture, in fact. So the crowd there was very, yeah, this is the next work.
Tell us about the crowd, Margret. What about the crowd?
Yeah, the crowd was very jolly and very, very, a lot of young people also, and they were very excited, and they, I mean, there was very few, some people came and watched from the distance and were hesitant to participate, or some came back several times and then never participated, but most were very much into it, and then kind of playing with it, like making their own, interpreting, you know, the kind of character that they became, giving it different interpretations. So. Do you want to move on to the next work? Okay, so I don't know how we are in terms of time, but maybe we can pause this for a moment and I explain something. Moving from Timeout to this work, there's something that is kind of important to explain, because in Timeout and some other projects also, where I use garments as a medium to enable certain situations, the body is protected, or the body is covered. The body is kind of a house, right? Or it disguises your identity. But in the case of this project, it's completely the opposite. So here I developed a textile, let's call it a textile prop, that is completely open on all sides. It has 12 holes and some strings on the sides that you can pull. And it's in the video that you see here, I asked like a number of participants to interpret this textile prop. I tend to use it to use the term garment, but it's not a garment, but it's kind of difficult to find the right word, because it is still related to the body. So maybe we can play the video and then I explain later what this is. We don't hear any sound, eh? Yeah, the sound is important because
Now you hear the sound.
yeah. So I did the filming in New York. All the participants, there's 10 participants. They are all close friends of mine, and they also know each other really well. And they are all somehow related to the building where the video was shot, 33 Flatbush Avenue, where my studio was for many years. Yeah, let's watch it a little bit, and then I explain more. Yeah, so let me explain a little bit what this was like. So I developed this this textile prop, and then I invited these 10 participants to basically to interpret it in their own way. The only instructions that I gave, I told them something about the prop itself, that it's made by hand. And I told them that it's not about decorating the body, but it's about how they relate to it. So I told them they can use all the holes and they can use the strings. They can pull the strings to create volume. And there is one middle piece, like the 3 pieces are really long down to the ground, and one piece in the middle is a little bit shorter, and there is like 2 seams, kind of shoulder seams, and this is the orientation, right? So I told them, when you get confused, because if you're in this for some time, you lose your orientation. If you want to find your orientation again, this is the orientation, those seams, right? So this is, I call it a performance for no audience, because the participants were in front of a video camera and I taped them, and it was complete improvisation. So what you see, I mean, what you just saw is like what the different participants made of it. And what you saw really is it okay? Yeah. What you saw really is their personality or their character, or how they felt, you know, that particular day. So I was interested in giving them a tool that is not changing the personality. I mean, that's what closing often does. It changes. Oh, thank you, Gianna. It yeah, through closing we change we become different people, right?
The chats at the moment, and for example, way back, Ron Smith wanted to know if people were allowed to lie down in the church as long as they wanted to.
Turn your sound on.
What?
Turn your sound
And yeah, Barbara said it's mesmerizing to watch this last work, and Gianna said the video is gorgeous. We agree, of course. I mean, is there another work that we should watch now, Margaret? Because I think the last work that we have on video is really interesting to show in the context of what we've seen, right? Or open up to questions would be fine also, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this, yeah, so to discuss this work that I was just showing, right, a little bit.
Right. So if anyone has comments or questions, please, this is a great time to speak about that. And otherwise, we have a million questions as well. What's interesting, the work, Margaret, with with the costume, of course, where you find your own sort of performative expression, and you didn't know what to call it. It was almost like it reminded me of a mask. You know, we wear these masks, but it's like a body mask, where a lot of the more obvious parts of expression that we normally see, we're not seeing them. We're just seeing these parts that can pop in and out and change shapes and such. And it's
yeah. So there is the connection between Timeout and this work, for instance, is that I'm interested in the visible and the invisible and the disappearance and silence, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, now Gianna has a question, so perhaps we should open up Gianna's microphone. There we go.
Yes, Margaret, so good to see you.
Gianna, louder.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now, yes.
So wonderful to see you and to see your work and to see you speaking about it. This was very meditative for me to see this video, but also my interpretation of it was how you've taken, like we have on a t-shirt 4 holes, and we go through the neck, the sleeves, and it's every day. So just the fact, and maybe I related more to fashion, but to the reality of wearing clothes, that it's something that we're performing every day. So it's just like navigating through this hole gave it a lot more dimensionality, because it's being, you know, the fashion conversation, it's so much, the identity so self-constrained. In Instagram now, if you don't have lips this size, if you don't have your eyebrows certain ways, it is so constrictive. And in a way, it's like I felt like this work for me was very transformative to see it, because it's the performance that we want to express through it, through movement. And you know, we become the wearers of the clothes. I don't know how to say it in English, but the clothes is wearing us instead of us wearing.
Yeah, exactly. But basically, the body is a hanger, right? And basically, you're also kind of the slave for the companies, right? Because what you do is you advertise their clothing, and a lot of people are not aware of it. But that's also how I developed the work. Like I was looking at the tradition of how clothing patterns were developed, and also how certain clothing designers were approaching the relation between body and clothing in different ways. Most of them are Japanese, actually, like Rei Kawakubo from Comme des Garçons, and of course Issey Miyake and Yoshi Yamamoto, who also considered clothing as a house, as a home, wearing the same coat all the time, and the longer you wear it, it becomes a home. But also, I'm very interested in clothing in relation to movement. So there's also a very interesting parallel between film and fashion, like when film in the 1920s, when film started to, like there was silent film, and then it was not silent anymore. In that time period, there was a very amazing French designer, Madeleine Bionnet, or Madame Bionnet, and she actually was the first one to use the fabric in a different fashion. So the warp was going diagonal, and because when you use the warp in a different way, the fabric falls in a different way. So when the actress moves, in front of the camera, the fabric flows, right? So that's so I was looking at those kind of examples, thinking like how can I create something that does not constrain the body, that does not define it, but how can I create a dialogue? Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
Thank you.
It's amazing how when you watch that, right, Gianna, this very it's like a strange language that you're seeing, like a vocabulary is created by these bodies, and you're not quite sure. Like, of course, we're seeing them, like the signal that you're giving us. Also, Margret, is kind of engaging, like hieroglyphics or something very ancient, in the way these things are forming, almost like amoebas are also, developing into another, life expression. We don't know what it will be. It's very interesting. It's very bizarre to see the video. Did you ever have it? You never performed it live, eh?
No, you see, the thing is that, yeah, I did perform it live once, and actually Barbara was one of the, right, Barbara, you participated once, yeah. The live performance is not so interesting because of course, like, so I film the performances, and then, you know, in the editing I make a lot of you know, choices, like what material to use, but also in the way that the material is edited. There is also a choreography of you know, of how, you know, it's edited in a theatrical way, right? Like, we were thinking about creating a depth in, you know, in how the different participants relate to each other. But also, you know, in the book, there is a very beautiful, so Mariana is here also. She wrote a very, very beautiful poem. Yeah, and actually her poem, it's almost like, I was really touched. Mariana, is she still there? when I first read it, I was really, really touched by it, because Mariana understood really, I would say, the essence of that work, because in the poem she talks about, Mariana, you talk about how, you know, like how you losing orientation, like, yeah, it's, Mariana, do you want to read a little bit of the text?
And then was it Barbara who had a question? Daria. Oh, Daria, where are you, Daria? Daria had a question also. Yeah.
I can.
Yes, my question was just, can you perhaps tell us something about the different kind of acting of all these people? Because some of them are looking like prisoners captured in this tissue and not getting out of the holes. And some others, I saw different of those videos, and some were reeling like dancers with wonderful clothes on and skirts swinging around. There's such a difference between interpretations.
Yeah, so the interpretation, so these are, yeah, like you could call them characters, but these reflect the personalities of the people. So for instance, there is one that really was kind of almost moving like a dancer, and actually I almost I had a hard time to include her in the work, and she was not so happy herself about, I mean, which is also strange, because it was not about doing a performance, it's about it's about improvisation, right? But for instance, the older man,
Al,
yeah,
he was amazing.
yeah,
When he went back, that was
yeah.
really magical.
So Al, for instance, I mean, I don't know. I didn't ask him like what I don't. He was not thinking of something. He just did it. You know, it's improvisation, and that's what I find so interesting. These people are not thinking of becoming a specific character. It's through the action, and also through, you know, feeling comfortable. I mean. We were there in a completely improvised space. We are all friends. You know, some feel more comfortable in front of the camera because, of course, they are aware that they are being filmed, and some feel a bit less comfortable. But then we would do like 2 rounds or 3 rounds, and then they forget about the camera. So I was really trying to get something that shows who they are. That's, yeah, and for me they are they are like representatives of humankind, you know. They are different generations and different cultural backgrounds and different professions, and yeah, I think yeah, that's how I like to see them.
Mariana.
Okay. Thanks. I really have enjoyed listening to you talk about it again, and hearing also the other reactions. It's funny because I didn't have a chance to wear it myself. So unlike all of the other pieces of yours that I experienced and then also felt personally in my body, and then also I watched from a distance, I didn't have that feeling with this one. So that was good to have that distance. But I can just read a little bit. I won't read the whole. This is from the end of it. Psychology and spirit are instructors. He's utopian, she's dignified. They're humble, modest, poised, amused, confused, democratized, borrowing the national dress of no nation. How to dress in a future that has already come and keeps on coming every new day. The film screen, white linen, and blank pages are surfaces for projection, texture, inscription. Turn yourselves around the material, lose yourselves in it, disappear and reappear through openings in the fabric, left side over right or right over left, wide kimono sleeves, immodesties, temptation. The whole country is wet. It's completely dark. Tiny lights shine through holes in the sky. This is called starlight.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Thank you. Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mariana, how you developed the text also, because you wrote a first version, and in the first version you were writing about yourself being in the back of a car as a kid, and kind of you know how kids play, like Mariana, you can maybe better talk about it, but it was like you know, a kid taking off their sweater and then putting it on in a different way.
Yeah, I think it's something that happens in a lot of your works, that you make the people who are experiencing them feel like young and like children, and in the sense that they don't understand how to do things. There's no right way to do things. And this piece was really like, this work really made me feel like that. And I think, yeah, and you can hide a little bit, but you're also exposed.
Margret, you make objects as well, you know, like standalone sculptures and objects and photography. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the work, and for example, the work behind you on behind your left shoulder, I guess it is.
Yeah,
young women
yeah.
women appear in your work from time to time. And
yeah, so actually for I would say for most of the time, or most of the past 30 years, I make more photography and sculptures. In any ways, I would say objects that can be exhibited in, you know, in galleries and museums and such, and basically can also be sold. While I very much enjoy working like that, there is also every time for me a big question mark, because I mean, essentially for me, it's really important that that I have a communication with the public, and of course I want my work to touch, to touch the viewer, to ask new questions, or to make somebody see the world in a different way. So I always feel like when the work is exhibited, for instance, in a gallery, I mean, it's a good thing that we have galleries and we can show the work, but very often the public that comes there is kind of only a very specific public, right? And also the environment is not always very friendly. I mean, some people don't dare to go into a gallery. So for me, it was always the question, like, what is that? Like, why would I produce things to be hung in a gallery space? Right. So for me, essentially, the work should not be in a gallery or in a museum. It should be, if it's like a photograph like this, it should also not be in my studio. It should be in somebody's house or in somebody's office, because only then the work starts to communicate to different people. It really has no purpose if it's just in my studio, right? So this is this is a little bit a kind of a constant struggle. I mean, now I start working on objects again, and these objects are much more minimal than other objects. It's a lot about materiality. And I enjoy making objects, but in the back of my mind, it's again the question: okay, if I make a new performance, like obviously at the moment with COVID and post-COVID, it's going to be challenging to do performances where people are sharing clothing, basically. So the last work that you just saw, which is basically a video work, that of course can be developed further, but performances like Timeout are going to be difficult to realize at the moment.
May I ask, Russell, you seem to be very present and engaged with Margret's work, and forgive me if I intrude, but perhaps you can share with us a little bit your association with Margret and her work, or what place do you have in her world from your perspective?
Sure. Margret and I are recent friends. I was invited to be part of an interview with Brainerd a few months ago, and I believe, Margret, you may have heard it, and you reached out, and I reached back, and then we Zoomed together. We met, and we shared each other's work on one-to-one over a very nice Zoom meeting where I showed her my work in my studio, and I went to a few links that Margret sent me. So I've seen Relay and Timeout, and I found the work extremely fascinating, as it also relates to what I do, and not exactly a direct way in that we work in a similar way in what we produce, but I think the approach that we take and how we see things and want to project things is we have a similar sensibility, even though we are working in different disciplines in a way.
Well, it's really great to have you part of this, Russell. And
thank you. Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Margret. It's really
engagement too.
It's great that you're here.
Thank you.
Hey, Margret, what is it that you're sort of where are you with your work now? Is there something that's holding you in a state of not knowing, something that you're exploring that you're not quite certain about yet? What are some of the processes that you're going through right now?
Yeah, well, what's quite interesting, like last year in January of 2020, I was in Singapore and I developed a performance with students there. And when I came back from Singapore, COVID started, and then and then I started to I made a first sculpture from a textile with the fabric that I took back from Singapore. And I wanted to make a sculpture that is very, very minimal. That was while I was working on it, every time it would be a little bit kind of figurative. I mean, in the past, I made sculptures from rubber that were kind of resembling the body. And now I felt that I wanted to make something that is focusing on material only, not so much on form. And with the new works that I'm struggling with it a little bit, but that's normal. Like when developing kind of a new language, it's a bit of a struggle because I'm working from not knowing. They are material plays a very important role, and minimal, a kind of a new minimalism, I would say. So I don't know yet where I'm going with this, but I find it intriguing at the moment.
Because Margret, you sort of ask us, you invite us to be inhabitants of the unknown. You ask us to be, transient visitors to transient realities. How is it that you put yourself in that space of transient reality and the unknown? What do you do to remain kind of raw and vulnerable to impulses you're not quite familiar with and work from the unconscious that may be pushing up? What do you do?
Yeah, for me, what do I do? I don't know. That is very difficult to explain, but it's very important for me to be in that state of unconsciousness, because essentially I want to create a work that has many different layers so that everybody can relate to the work in a different way. So as soon as I start interpreting, or I start working from knowing, from knowledge, or I would write a concept, and then I would do research, and I work based on that research, and I fill it in. Then there is maybe not so. I really like to work from ambiguity. That's something very important for me, because I think it opens the door to other worlds, and I think it's really important that I think that's a really important function that art has, to open doors to other worlds that we still have to explore
through the tunnel.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's very generous of you to share those more vulnerable aspects of the creative process, Margret. And I noticed in some of your objects, they seem to, some of these more alchemical objects, they seem to have a few elements, and it's almost as though you're adding these elements in a very sort of contemplative way. And at a certain point, you seem to let go, and the object just sort of suddenly has a life. And this very nuanced sensibility or sensitivity to the form and the material, and sort of the transmission that's coming from that object. So it's almost a little bit like voodoo or something very mystical, and I'm not quite sure how to get my arms around it, but it feels very intriguing and seductive and sort of engaging, and a little bit like the fog on the mountain. When the fog goes across the mountain, there's a certain sense of, well, where's the mountain and what is that fog? It's sort of this interesting interstitial space of uncertainty and freedom. So I just want to say, you know, also congratulations and great esteem for what you're doing and how you do. As always, it's very unfortunate to have only a limited amount of time when you know that this is more like, you know, a 12-hour engagement. And we're very sad, but somehow that's a good thing. That kind of, you know, amazing feeling of satisfaction and melancholy at the same time to say goodnight. But anyway, maybe somebody else has a comment or something to say, a question. I was impressed at a certain moment during our talk tonight. I remembered my father, that I brought him to, well, he wasn't, my father was a victim of cancer back in 1982, and his family didn't tell him about it. So he was somehow, you know, in this space of dying, but not sort of inhabiting the process of it. So I made a trip to Italy to tell him, hey, you're dying. And, you know, out of love, your family's not telling you this, but this is what's happening. Eventually, my father went to a hospital up near Milano. And one day, he found himself waking up in the refrigerated room with dozens of corpses all around him.
Oh my God.
He was put in that room thinking that he had died. But, you know, doctors had somehow pronounced him dead. And the guy woke up in this room with all these corpses, like, and it just somehow burned into my mind, this very bizarre space. And my father wasn't so creative in a sense to be able to express what that experience was like. But, you know, he's left it to me in a very interesting way to, you know, to examine and appreciate. And I thank you, Margret, personally for taking me back there for that moment with my dad. And also for being with us at the beginning of our trip, which ended in my father's hometown in Italy. So thanks for renewing and reviving the dead tonight in a very special way.
Well, thank you so much for having me on this show. For those friends of mine who joined tonight and maybe who have not seen any of the other episodes yet, I tell you, please just watch more of the episodes. Gianna, I totally loved yours. Yeah, I was blown away. It was fantastic. So much energy.
Tell us about the show quickly. Next week, is it, Margret?
Oh, this one. Yeah, this one. Okay, there's another online presentation together with an art space in Innsbruck, and we're going to focus mainly on this work and on the book and on the video. So
we can't wait to see you again, and Margret, to collaborate.
Yes, definitely.
You want to say anything?
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Good night, folks.
Thank you
Good night.
very much.
Thank you so much for coming, all of you.
Great to see everybody, meet everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.